We have one more story for you, and this is regarding small businesses. They obviously have many challenges in this economy. What one people rarely think about is all the licenses and permits that you have to get. And sometimes making sure you're complying with requirements is easier said than done. As a result, small businesses end up paying thousands of dollars a year in fines. So we have Jason Nazar, the CEO of License 123, on with us. And this company helps small businesses sort of get their affairs in order on this front. Jason, I wanted to sort of first go over why it's so hard to figure out what licenses you need, and then we'll go through some of the most common ones that are overlooked. But to start off, why is it so hard to figure this out?
Sure, Diane, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
Well, the licenses that you need for your business are based upon what kind of business you have and then what city you're in. And so there's no uniformity from city to city or business to business. And many times you may be running a business that needs 6, 7, 8 licenses or permits, and you have to go to different websites, different URLs. There's no one place that tells you everywhere the licenses and permits you need. And if you were to use a professional like a lawyer or accountant, they're probably doing it for the first time, and you may get charged upwards of $2,500. And so the process is just very maddening, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur and you're trying to focus on getting customers or building a product.
And I know we've all heard the story of, the girl who opens a lemonade stand, or the boy who's trying to sell, cookies or something, and that ends up getting brought up on, busted basically for not having a permit for that business. But that has to be a rarity. So I'm wondering, what are some of the more common permits that people overlook?
Well, certainly any business that's dealing with food is going to have a wide variety of permits. And you might be surprised that a lot of retail businesses don't require permits other than just a standard city business license. But even things like video game arcade requires a specialized permit for it. And in Beverly Hills and in Las Vegas, if you're a fortune teller or a psychic, you need to get a specialized permit just for that, although they probably already know that.
We hope so, or otherwise they're not very good at their business. And one thing you mentioned was renting property. Sometimes you need a license just to do that.
That's true. Sometimes if you're renting out your own home or an apartment building or a duplex, you could be required to have a specialized permit just to do that.
And you talked about food, but there's a difference between if you have an open flame, a kitchen. I know there are different permits associated with something like that versus if you just sell packaged food. So what's the permitting like for a business that sells, sort of packaged food? It's safe, you're not worried about it getting contaminated, that sort of thing.
Well, the typical restaurant, bar, or nightclub is going to require about 6 to 8 different permits. And that's pretty consistent across a lot of states in the U.S. Now, even in some cases, if you're just selling yogurt, if you're a yogurt shop, you need specialized required permits for that. So certainly if you're cooking the food, there's more permits required. But anytime you're doing anything with food, chances are you're going to have a lot of permits and licenses. And if you don't have them, you're subject to a meaningful amount of penalties and fines from your city.
And we all want to make sure grandma and grandpa are taken care of, but care of the elderly is another area where you say that permits are much more abundant than you think. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and that's another area where it's just confusing. There are some states that if you do activities with the elderly or run a senior care facility, you don't require any permits. But in cities in California, for example, you need to have a lot of permits to do anything with the elderly and certainly to run any elder care facility.
And what if you work from home? I would think of all the places that would be the last place you would need to worry about all these permits, no?
You would think so, and in many cases,
I see the smile on your face, and something
permit.
tells me that's not the case.
In some cities, especially in California, there is a work-at-home permit that's required, especially if you're bringing people into your home to provide that service. So even in your own home, you're not safe from business permits and licenses.
Well, and what level? I mean, it makes sense. I know child care is another area. A lot of people like to babysit, especially if they're already stay-at-home moms. It kind of makes sense that people want to make sure that their kids are taken care of by someone who is qualified. But what's the level like to get licensed or a permit for something like that?
Typically, babysitting doesn't require as many permits. I don't think the city governments are going to be going after too many teenage girls and boys. But in some cases and in some cities, it does, typically more if you're running a facility. So if you're going to be watching over many children at the same time, you're certainly going to need a permit or a license.
And we just got this one in from one of our live chats, one of our guests here. This is from Ellery. She's asking, does one need permits and the like if I were to sell candy I make in my basement if I just sell them from my house?
Most probably, yes.
What kind of permits could somebody need for a business that small?
Well, to start off with, you're always going to need a city business license. That's the basic. Anytime you're providing a good or a service, you're going to need it. And then again, if you are looking to provide any kind of food of sorts, there's often regulations that the city and state, and sometimes even the federal government, are require. And that's really why we created License 123.
What kind of penalties are we talking about here for being in violation, though?
Well, for example, in the city of San Francisco, or the city of Santa Monica, if you don't have certain business licenses, the basic business license, they may give you a misdemeanor. In the city of San Francisco, if you deal with hazardous waste materials, which sounds, not very common, but mechanics do, you could be getting fines in the tens of thousands of dollars a day. If you run a food truck and you don't have all the required permits, you could be getting fines of $500 a day. So these can really add up if you don't do the process correctly.
So what can businesses do to make sure, I know your company specializes in sort of helping them through the process. What are your recommendations for new businesses that haven't necessarily gotten everything in order but are just looking forward and trying to anticipate the cost of all of this?
The first is just to realize that most likely there are going to be a variety of licenses and permits you need for your business, and those are going to renew. So it's not just when you're starting your business, but typically on an annual or every 2-year basis, you're going to need to renew these permits. And you can go to sites like ours that we just launched, License 123, and you put in your state, city, industry, and type of business. And what we do is we aggregate all that information that would typically take you 2 weeks of research or paying an attorney, accountant, to tell you exactly the licenses and permits you need, where you need to file them, how much they cost, if there's an online application to be able to do it there. And we don't have full coverage of every city in the U.S. because we just launched the product, but certainly do the research yourself, spend the time, and if you're too busy, ask your attorney or accountant to help you out with the process.
And what kind of a charge would you incur for that kind of service?
Well, in our case, using an attorney and accountant.
Right, yeah, I'm wondering how much it costs to, go pay an attorney or accountant to do this for you,
really
or
be
use
as
a
much
site like yours?
Well, if you use an attorney or accountant, it could be as much as $2,500. And the reason it could be so much is because they're probably going through the process for the first time. I mean, if you go to your attorney and say, I want to start a bar or nightclub in San Diego, they've probably never done that before, and they're just billing you for their own research hours. So that's why, we built License 123. So we'll take a team of researchers, we'll use the resources we have at our parent company, DocStock, and basically let small business owners and operators know every single license and permit they need fast and easy, and it's only a $10 report they pay for to get access to all of that information.
All right. Jason Nazar from License 123. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Ann. And I'm waiting for my invitation to come see your band, Paradise.
Oh, boy. He's blown my cover. All right, Jason, that will be coming in the mail for you. Just hold on. It'll be right there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, Jason. Thanks.